Hey Canucks fans, welcome to the Line Change. Now before we dive into our topic today, I want to give a quick shout out and thank you to my sponsor, Gassy Jack Art, maker of this amazing artwork you see on display behind me. And you guys can check them out yourselves at gassjackart.com. You can also find him on Instagram at gassjackart. You'll find a link to his website in the description down below. Now, on to our topic of discussion. We're going to be going over an article from our friends over at Canucks Army. This is an intriguing one as Stéphane Roger goes over some viable big names the Canucks could target at the trade deadline if, and keep this in mind, if the Canucks are contending at the deadline. We're going to go over the names and give our thoughts on them. Feel free to let us know in the comments section down below who out of these names would you like the Canucks to potentially target, as maybe a rental or, buying at the deadline, keeping in mind that this whole conversation is from the perspective and the scenario that the Canucks are contending around this time. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. Oh, there we go. And it goes on to say the Vancouver Canucks are currently in their Schrodinger's cat phase of the 25-26 season. Nobody yet knows if they're going to leap to the occasion and return to the playoffs or if they're going to come out with all the energy of a dead feline. With so many different outcomes feasibly on the table for this season, we thought it was a fine time to explore some of the more extreme scenarios. We have a topic that no one could possibly find controversial, the idea of the Canucks buying, or even worse, renting at the 2026 trade deadline. We invite you once again to imagine a scenario in which we are approaching the March 2026 NHL trade deadline, and this time the Canucks are cruising to a playoff position. Think the 23-24 campaign and where they spent most of the year at the top of the Pacific Division. And look, we know that even if that scenario were to come to pass, the idea of the Canucks going out and renting a pending UFA, or possibly even two, would still be unpopular, to say the least. Vancouver fans have all too much experience with the concept, including during the aforementioned 23-24 season, when GM Patrick Allvin and company acquired pending UFA Elias Lindholm for a couple months before he left in free agency. So we know that even if the Canucks were to be at the top of the division by March 2026, there are still many among us who would not want them to be buyers. That's you. Just keep in mind that this is a little more than a hypothetical designed to explore the market for UFA rentals several months ahead of the deadline. And for the rest of us, the scenario we're considering is this. It's late February or early March. The Canucks are looking like contenders again. They've had a great season up until this point, and Allvin and company are looking to rent a pending UFA. Which big names might be available for them at that time? Let's go ahead and take a look at the first name we have on the list, which is Marty Necas of the Colorado Avalanche. His 2025-26 cap hit is $6.5 million. And last season in 24-25, he played 79 games, had 83 points in 79 games, and 27 of those were goals, 56 of them were assists, and he had an average ice time of 19 minutes that season. Aside from the really big names and more on them later, Necas is easily the most productive pending UFA around, and he's one that has some interesting context around him. For one, we know that the Canucks have been interested in Necas before due to their previous trade talks with his now former team, the Carolina Hurricanes. We also know from Mikko Rantanen's example last year that the Avalanche are not hesitant to trade a pending UFA if they are unable to get them under contract. So it's a little more possible that he moves as opposed to any other UFA on a playoff-bound team. And if his name is offered around, one has to assume that the Canucks would show interest, especially if Necas plays more at center this season. We'll see if that happens. I do think Necas will be a mainstay on the first line, playing with Nathan MacKinnon. So who knows, maybe he'll see some time at center, maybe on the power play or PK, or at least at some point, maybe if MacKinnon, heaven forbid, suffers an injury and has to miss any time, perhaps they could slot Marty Necas into that spot. But I do think he will mainly be on the wing during this season. I'm actually a really big fan of Marty Necas. I've been a fan of Necas's for quite some time now. And actually, believe it or not, I'm also a big fan of the Hurricanes. At least several years ago, I had Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, and Natchez in my fantasy hockey pool. So because of that, I actually ended up watching quite a bit of Carolina Hurricanes games. Um, almost as much as Canuck games that I was watching, and I absolutely loved watching the Hurricanes play. And just it was just the experience of watching a different team and seeing it from kind of like a different angle, um, and just seeing how fast that team was. It was really it was a nice balance or opposite of from the Canucks at the time. Canucks were not doing so great, and it was nice to watch a different pace. If you guys know what I'm getting at, but so yeah, I've been a big fan of Natchez for quite some time. I absolutely love the idea of bringing in Natchez. Even if he were a rental, obviously I would prefer if it was a more long-term thing, because I think he would. And call me crazy, but I think having Natchez on PD's wing would be awesome, and I think he would be a great winger for PD, and I think those two would be like dynamite. So let me know in the comment section down below if you guys agree or disagree with that. But I really like the idea of Natchez. We've talked about him before on this channel way earlier back in like January or February. We were talking about Natchez, or even just prior to the playoffs, we were talking about Natchez. But I really like the idea of bringing in Natchez. So this is a big yes for me, at least when it comes to the names. I would be very high on them attempting to bring in Natchez. Next up, we have Alex Tuch of the Buffalo Sabres. His 25-26 cap hit is $4.75 million. And in 24-25, he played 82 games, 67 points. 36 of those were goals, and 31 of them were assists. And his average ice time was 19 minutes and 15 seconds. Most of the players on this list will be centers for obvious reasons. It's by far the Canucks' greatest position of need, but Tuch earns a mention for a couple of reasons. For one, he's incredibly talented, but in terms of his raw production and the pseudo power forward style that he plays. For another, there are those persistent rumors that due to his spouse being from the Vancouver area, Tuch might look to sign with the Canucks when he hits, free agency. Perhaps if Buffalo fails in their own attempt to make the playoffs, there is the possibility of an early access deal. A right wing may not be the largest priority, but more scoring in general is, and if a player this good were to become available, specifically seek out Vancouver, then worrying about his position might be secondary. I do like the idea of bringing in Tuch. I've been a big fan of Tuch's. Obviously, the Canucks need that second line center and need more help at center than they do on the wing. Matter of fact, they have maybe too many wingers. So perhaps just because of that, this might not be a good fit. But you can't deny the goal scoring that Tuch provides. And I'd be okay with it but it would probably have to the Canucks would probably have to move a winger out in order to, compensate for bringing Tuch in. But again, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about Alex Tuch being a deadline acquisition for the Canucks. Next up, we have Christian Dvorak from the Philadelphia Flyers. His 25-26 cap hit is $5.4 million. In 24-25, he played 82 games, 33 points, 12 of them were goals, 21 of them were assists, and he had an average ice time of 15 minutes and 15 seconds. I'm not a big fan of this one, and I'm sure a lot of Canucks fans are also not a fan of this as well, but it is a name. He is a pending UFA, so sure, Dvorak might not meet everyone's qualifications as a big name with his career high of 38 points and general profile. However, we do know that the Canucks were heavily interested in him this past summer as a free agent. In the end, the Canucks were outbid by the Flyers, who made a somewhat preposterous offer of 1 year at $5.4 million. They had the money. Although if the Flyers continue to miss out on the playoffs, Dvorak will be made available as a rental, then maybe the Canucks could get their man, ideally at a retained rate. We don't imagine too many folks would be excited about that outcome. Yeah, one of them. but there must be something in Dvorak's game that the Canucks like in order to pursue him as hard as they did. At the very least, there's no reason for their interest to have suddenly dissipated. Honestly, I think the Canucks really dodged a bullet, not getting Dvorak. I think Canucks fans would lose their minds if the Canucks had actually signed Dvorak to, in particular, a contract like that, even if it was 1 year. Sure, they technically traded for somebody with a contract similar to that. They got Evander Kane, but I think I'd pick Evander Kane over Dvorak any day of the week. So this is a big no for me. Once again, let me know in the comment section down below. Are you guys with me? Or do you guys think the Canucks could maybe target their man and get their man? We've heard that before. And when the Canucks have an idea of who they want, they, go to the ends of the earth to go out and get them. Marcus Pettersson was exactly that. And look at what happened. The Canucks managed to land Marcus Pettersson at in my opinion, a pretty steep price for those JT Miller fans. Next up, we have Evgeny Malkin from the Pittsburgh Penguins. His 25-26 cap hit is $6.1 million. And in 24-25, he played 68 games, 50 points, 16 of them were goals, 34 of them were assists, and his average ice time was 17 minutes and 47 seconds. Of all the names on this list, here's the biggest. Sure, Malkin, who turned 39 this past summer, isn't quite what he used to be, but he's still a better than average 2C at the very least, and a first ballot Hall of Famer with a long history of winning. Malkin will be the master of his own destiny, and he'll only move if he wants to. But with many suspecting that this will be his last season in the NHL, there is a possibility that he wants one last shot at the playoffs, and thus requests a deadline trade to a contender. And remember, under our hypothetical scenario here, the Canucks are playing like a contender. Interestingly enough, though, Jim Rutherford was the GM for one of Malkin's cup-winning clubs in Pittsburgh. The two have never negotiated with one another. Malkin was under the same contract when Rutherford arrived in Pittsburgh as when he left. Still, there's at least some working relationship there, and if that's enough to convince Malkin to choose Vancouver as his NHL swan song, then this is a decidedly fun possibility. And I 100% agree with that last part. It would be a fun possibility. Obviously, there is worry about his age. But hey, this is Evgeny Malkin we're talking about. And if he's, if this does end up being his last season and he wants to one last shot at the playoffs, wants to go to a contender, then by all means, yeah, I'd be open to bringing in Malkin, even if he were, just a rental. But, if you really think about it, he's one of those guys similar to Matt Sundin, that you can say, Evgeny Malkin played for my team. Evgeny Malkin was a Vancouver Canuck. It's something that Canucks fans would be able to say, especially if you were to come here, even if it's for a brief stint. So obviously Malkin's not my first choice because of his age and him being like purely a rental, especially if he does decide to retire at the end of the season. But as the article mentioned, Malkin is the master of his own destiny. He'll only move if he wants to. So yeah, there's that. Next up, we have Nick Schmaltz from the Utah Mammoth. His 25-26 cap hit is $5.85 million. And in 24-25, he played 82 games, 63 points, 20 goals, 43 assists, and his average ice time was 18 minutes and 35 seconds. Like many who have spent their time in the combined Arizona-Utah franchise, Schmaltz has gone a little under the radar in his NHL career, but he's quietly developed into a very consistent producer down the middle, with his last 4 season point totals being 59, 58, 61, and 63. That's some 2C scoring that can really be relied upon from a right-handed 2C to boot. At age 29, 2 years older than Clayton Keller, Schmaltz might just slightly be out of the range of the Mammoth's current build. Their bid for the playoffs is unsuccessful, and Schmaltz remains unsigned. He makes sense to be traded for more feature assets, and if so, then while he's not a household name, he would be a name that makes a lot of sense for the Canucks, and I completely agree with that. I'm a big fan of Nick Schmaltz. I think he would be a great addition to the Canucks, especially down the middle, if things aren't going so well with Hedl, and they really could use some extra firepower, especially when it comes to, as I mentioned, down the middle. I think I even talked about Nick Schmaltz like way back in like January, not January because the channel wasn't around then, but like when the channel first started and we were talking like deadline stuff, I was really, pushing hard for the Canucks to look at Nick Schmaltz. I thought he would be a good option. I even thought he would be a good, maybe in free agency or something like that. But I do like the idea of bringing in Nick Schmaltz. Obviously, again, preferably not as a rental. Preferably get him maybe long term, or with at least some sort of guarantee that he will stay long term and won't just be a rental and won't just leave at the end of the season. So there's that. Next up, we have JG Pajot of the New York Islanders, with his cap hit for 25-26 is $5 million, and in 24-25 he played 79 games, 42 points, 14 goals, 28 assists, and he had an average ice time of 17 minutes. This is the point at which we knew we were reaching the end of the list, and more on that later. That said, Pajot is probably an overall underrated NHL center who typically paces ahead of 40 points while providing better than average defensive coverage and plenty of intangibles. He's not a perfect 2C solution. He might not even be a 2C on a true contender, but he's a valuable piece of depth down the middle all the same, and the kind that playoff bound teams are usually looking to pick up around deadline time. So in conclusion, we don't always feel the need to I'll ignore that. Screw it, I'll say it. We don't always feel the need to write a conclusion to shopping lists like this, but this time it feels appropriate. And the conclusion is this. Honestly, this isn't a great year for UFA rentals. There are some really, really big names still on the pending UFA list. Names like Connor McDavid, Jack Eichel, Kirill Kaprizov, Artemi Panarin, and Kyle Connor. But those names are all so big that they'll either be extended by their current teams or, if not, traded in a fashion that's a bit over and above the whole quote-unquote rental app, concept. But that secondary tier of pending UFAs from which the quote-unquote top-tier rentals are typically drawn is actually relatively light this year. With all due respect to the players themselves, if we're hitting quote-unquote Dvorak and quote-unquote Pajot on a list of big names, it might just be a short barrel we're scraping from. But then again, maybe the most interesting conclusions to be drawn from this class of UFA rentals are the lack thereof. When it comes to the Canucks and their own pending UFAs, maybe this is a reason for them to consider doing some selling, even if they're approaching the playoffs come March. In a limited market, players like Kiefer Sherwood and Teddy Blueger could return some outsized assets. I do agree with that, but I don't know if I'd be willing to let go of Kiefer Sherwood. I've obviously become a big fan of Kiefer Sherwood, and most Canuck fans, he's won over the fans. So he's probably someone that the Canucks would want to, or that Canucks fans would want to keep. And for those who bristled at the very concept of this article and are dead set against the Canucks doing any sort of renting, then maybe the limited market is great news. Very good point. Fewer rentals available after all should mean less of a chance of the Canucks renting, right? Either way, this was nothing more than a glimpse of a future that may or may not come to pass, but that, no matter what, is months away. So as I mentioned at the start of this video, this is an intriguing topic, and I thought it was interesting to do a video and talk about it. So that being said, Canuck fans, let me know in the comment section down below. What do you guys think about this? Do you guys like the idea of the Canucks being buyers at the deadline if they are a contending team when the deadline approaches? Would you guys rather they were a selling team at the deadline, despite being in this scenario, a contending team? Are there any names on this list that you would absolutely love the Canucks to quote unquote rent for a playoff run or buy? Or is there people on this that weren't even on this list that you think would be good? Perhaps they're not necessarily big names, but as I said, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. And as always, if you guys like this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to stay up to date on all your Vancouver Canucks content, be sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you don't miss a single video. you're looking for us on social media, you can find us, as you can see here, Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. Those are all our social media outlets, and feel free to give us a follow on all of them. And also, lastly, if you prefer an audio version of this podcast, you can find us on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. On Spotify, feel free to give us a follow, as well as rate and review us. It is, of course, greatly appreciated, and it really helps out the podcast as well. But that's going to do it for me. As always, let's go Canucks, and I'll see you guys in the next video.